Because if you market something really, really well, you never have to sell.
Hello, 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 and welcome to Money Talk, where we get to talk about my favorite topic, money. Today, I'm going to be joined by my special guest, Bill Fairman. Bill Fairman is the fund manager and co-founder of North Carolina Hard Money. Now, he's going to talk to us today about some ideas about investments and the best places to make investments. But I think that we're going to want to ask him some questions. So please feel free to engage and ask those questions or DM or send me something. So joining me right now is Bill Fairman.
Welcome. Hi, Linda. How are you?
I am certainly much better than I was a week ago. I had walk-in pneumonia, so it was challenging. But thank you for joining us. As managing member of Carolina Capital Management, what do you do?
Well, actually, our business is structured. It's a really nice ecosystem. What we do is we provide small businesses, in this case, it's real estate investors, with the capital that they need to run their businesses with. So we provide short-term acquisition and construction loans for single-family properties, multifamily properties, self-storage, and small strip centers. So what we're doing is we're changing neighborhoods, we're changing people's lives on the lending side of things. And then on the investment side, how we get the capital to make these loans is that we have a Regulation D fund that accredited investors can invest in, and they can participate in the profits that the lending business has for them as well. So it's a nice little ecosystem.
It's a really nice ecosystem. And some of these things, some of our listeners are not going to understand, like the Regulation D and things like that, but some of those that are listening will.
Sure.
You know, in terms of lending to construction loans and things of that nature, how does what the market's doing impact your decision to be able to lend? If there's 30% of, I read a number yesterday that 32% of distressed property owners expect to see the price drop in 2023. Now, maybe that's hopeful thinking or wishful thinking, but as a distressed property owner, I wouldn't want to have that thinking. I would want to think it's going up and it's going to continue to go up. How is this going to impact your business?
Well, one of the things about real estate is it's local. It just depends on where your properties are. If they're distressed, by the way, that price is going to be low. People aren't going to pay the same market value for a distressed property as they are for one that's ready to move into. Now, distress can mean several things. It could mean that there's something wrong with the property that needs to be fixed up or something of that nature. Or it could be that you, the borrower or the owner, are distressed and can no longer afford the home or whatever reason. It doesn't mean the property is distressed. It means that the owner can be distressed.
We're really not in that kind of market space anymore, like we were in 2008, 2010, where you saw that whole debacle going on. Why did you get into private lending as a profession?
I've been in the mortgage business for over 30 years. I've always been a problem solver. I started off as a retail loan officer. I ended up moving into what they called the wholesale space, where we had a bigger line of credit than most of the other mortgage companies. So they would send us their loans and we would get them funded. And because I got into the private lending space because of 2008, we had the big crash. The mortgage business was completely shaken up. I had to get into another profession for a while to make ends meet. And we formed a private lending company because we were filling a gap that was left in the wake of the 2008 crash. Banks
Now,
weren't lending to these.
you bring up a really good point, because lenders were not lending. They were terrified. They were, you couldn't find a lender. And it
Right.
really was private money that kick-started, because, lenders understand that you only make money when you're loaning the money, right?
Right. Well,
And
you're only making money when you're receiving payments. And so there
this
was
is
a lot of lenders out there that became homeowners, unwilling homeowners. So
This is true.
that said, over the history, single family housing, for example, since the 50s has had a 3.5% increase in value average since the 50s. So at some point, values will come back. What happens is, do you have the runway or the time frame to wait that long? That's why I love being on the banking side of things. So when we lend money on a particular property, we're only lending at a maximum of around 70% of the value. So when you do have a lowering of values for whatever reason, we have a pretty good cushion for our investment. And that's why I like the banking side. You have a lot less responsibility than the owner of the property.
Yeah, I think that you echo the response of many lenders today, at 70% LTV. But on a hard money basis, talk to me about hard money, and why do people use hard money versus bridge loans?
Well, you can pretty much say that a hard money loan and a bridge loan are the same. You just have different rate structures um, based on the type of company that you're borrowing from. You can have a bridge lender that is going to lend you money for a much lower rate. They're going to be more like a bank. They're going to take a lot more time to evaluate the asset. And if you're a real estate investor, time is not on your side. You have to move quickly. Hard money lender is still going to do the same type of bridge loan. They're going to charge a little bit more, but they're going to get through the process very quickly. We typically close a loan in 10 days. Your typical bridge lender, for commercial especially, they're going to take 30, sometimes 40 days to close a loan. By that time, the deal is moved on.
It has moved on, and they're very busy, making sure that the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed. And
Sure.
not that you aren't, but they're very busy on a different set of focus, like cross collateralization and other
Right.
things that make it risky. And for a lender, the lender just wants to know he's going to be paid back. Isn't that the
Well,
most important issue?
here's the thing that people don't think about. Hard money lenders do interest only loans, and they're annualized. So let me give you an example. Let's say our rate's 12%. If you only need the money for 6 months, you're only making 6 payments, you're actually only paying 6% interest. So while it sounds high, it really isn't. And it's much better to finance these properties for the acquisition than it is to find a equity partner that is going to bring the money, and that you have to give up anywhere from 30 to 50% of your uh, profit.
That you've just said a mountain of information right there. And I think that when people are looking at flips or investment properties, they're constantly looking at, well, I have this skill set, and I'm going into this with this skill set, but I need capital. And the only way I'm going to get capital, because they're not sophisticated, they don't know the options that are available to them from companies like yours, Bill. They will take on a partner that you just said the most magic things. They'll give up 30 to 50% of their ownership because somebody else had the cash to do it, and they have the sweat equity.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you don't want that to be your continuing source of funding, because you're giving up way too much at that point. And when you're first starting out, you're probably better off getting an equity partner, because it's going to be harder for you to get a loan, because while the hard money lenders have a little bit wider scope when it comes to looking at a deal, the one thing that they want is experienced borrowers, because no one lends money. I don't care who it is. No one lends money because they want the property. If they did, they just get the property themselves. They want the cash flow.
I think that goes without saying, but I think a lot of borrowers just they don't think that, and they don't go into it with that. But understanding that that is your focus, I think, is a real key point here.
Right. And
Yeah.
listen, we do everything we can to help that person on the front end when they bring us a deal. We're looking at it and we're saying, hey, this really isn't a deal. We turn a lot of deals away and that we could make and make money on, but we want the borrower to be successful because we want that borrower to come back to us a second time and a third time and a fourth time. We don't want just to do one and done. So
No.
in our book, everybody needs to be successful, our investors as well as the borrowers.
So let's flip over to the investors for just a
Mhm.
moment. Um, why and why do investors generally come to yours to fund things? And I understand that you're going to have a mix of investors. So investors that understand properties, understand
Sure.
property values, have actually earned, or they could even be investors themselves that have decided they really don't want to do property ownership anymore.
Yeah, we have people that are actually lending their own money out as well. Um, the thing is, if you have, we'll just say, for example, if you have a self-directed retirement account and you are a hard money lender on your own or a private lender, that's fine. You can make a little bit more money doing that yourself, but now you're having to do all the due diligence on the properties. You're having to manage that loan as it goes through its construction draws. And then what happens at the end of that term and they pay you off? Well, now there's a gap between the time that they pay you off and the next deal you get into. So
Right.
if you're making 12% interest yourself, and then there's a month or a month and a half between the times you get the money back out there again, you're really only making about 9.5%. So it's important to get inside of a fund eventually where that money is continuously working. And then if you can find a fund that allows you to compound over time, if you don't need the cash flow and you're just looking for growth, our fund, as well as some other funds out there, will allow you to take those earnings every quarter and then just put them back in and recirculate them. And then the compounding effect is one of the eighth wonders of the world. To me,
We
if you,
we love compound interest, don't we?
yeah, to me, the best analogy I can have is if you have a 401k where you have an employer that is matching a certain amount of your the money that you're putting into your 401k. That's what
Right.
compounding does. That's the employer that's adding a little bit of extra because at the end of every cycle, you now have a new higher balance that you're making your percentage on. So it's a beautiful thing.
It's a beautiful thing. What are some of the obstacles that you have to overcome when you're talking to investors to make this leap? Is it a hard sell, or is it a pretty easy positioning?
Well, there's a couple of things. If they already understand real estate, it's not a big deal. Most everybody that has the money to put into a fund is a homeowner, so they do understand what a mortgage is and how it works. The thing with most private placement funds is they are smaller. You need to be concerned about how many eyes are on the fund. There's a lot of faith you have to put into the management team that they know what they're doing and that they're uh, trustworthy individuals. In our particular case, we purposely have a fund administrator that's looking at the books. We have a separate CPA firm that does the tax returns, and then we have another separate third-party CPA firm that comes in and does our annual audit. So we have three separate sets of eyes on the books at all time. It's also important that that fund is investing in something that or making loans on something that's highly liquid. About 55% of what we do is not just single family homes, but it's median price point homes, meaning as a banker, anytime you're making a loan, your first thought is if I have to take this property back, how quickly can I get rid of it? Because you want that money back again working instead of out there trying to sell the house that's overpriced or in a market where you have fewer people that are looking for that type of a house. So we stay in the median price point. We
When
also,
you say median price point, what is the median price point?
well,
You're in the
whatever,
Carolinas, correct?
any particular area that we lend in, and we lend throughout the Southeast. So the median price point in Charlotte's probably around 300,000 in that neighborhood. Other markets are going to be a little bit lower. Other markets are going to be a little bit higher. But you want to stay in a place, especially single family, where first time home buyers can afford them, empty nesters want them, and then real estate investors want them. You want the biggest piece of the pie of potential buyers in that market. The other thing is if you get to a point where you have another 2008 where everyone was a seller and no one was a buyer, you can still rent these properties out and get the income that you're supposed to get from your fund from rental income. Because one thing that happened in 2008, while values were going down, rents never went down, they went up. So you have to keep
That is a strange phenomena, isn't it?
Well, here's the thing. People always, no matter what economy you're in, people always need two things: food and shelter.
Shelter.
So if you've lost your house due to foreclosure in 2008, you still needed a place to live. So, and most families still wanted to stay in a house. So the amount of rental properties, and I'm losing the word here, but supply and demand, the demand for rental properties went higher, so rents went up. The people that got hurt that owned rental properties in 2008 were hurt because they over leveraged their properties originally. If you were at 70% of the value or less, you had plenty of exit strategies.
Plenty of margin.
Right.
The joke here was, if you could fog a mirror, you could get a loan, right? So if you had 10% down, what kind of leverage do you have? There was no room
none.
for error, none. So lenders have become a lot more careful and more specific on their intent on lending.
And then, on our commercial side, when we do commercial loans as well, listen, they're all commercial loans, but what I mean is commercial property. So multifamily we're into, we lend on those. We lend on self-storage and we lend on strip centers. So
how do you find self-storage? I mean, that's like the most in-demand product type right now.
Well, we have an unhealthy relationship with our junk. So people moving up the economic ladder, they're buying stuff. They don't want to get rid of their old stuff. They put it in storage. People moving down the economic ladder, they don't have as much space. They still want to keep their stuff. And then, you may have somebody that inherited some things that have emotional attachments to them. They don't want to throw them away. They put them in storage. So those are beautiful. On the strip centers, I really like those. I'm not looking at the Amazon effect, as long as they're the smaller local strip centers without the big anchor tenants, because Amazon can't deliver hot coffee to you. Amazon can't cut your hair. Amazon's not going to groom your dog, right? So all those little local.
So what you're talking about is mom and pop shops that keep the neighborhood running.
Yeah, and those centers, you can, as an owner of those, and this is why we like lending on them, you can buy them and they're still going to cash flow, even if they're, I'll call the facelift out of date, because with those things, about every 10 to 15 years, you want to give them a facelift, but they'll still cash flow without the facelift.
I can relate to that, Bill.
And then, it's not very expensive to do a nice facelift on these things. You can just add a little bit of extra to the front of the building. Looks great. I've got one where you can just add awnings to them that look good. You can open up some bigger windows in them and paint the place, and that's really all you need. And then to seal the parking lot, and you're good to go.
Seal the parking lot and restripe, and you're ready to go.
Yep. So we like to stay in those. The other reason we like them is because they're multi-tenanted. So if you lose a couple of tenants, you're still getting paid because you have other tenants in place.
You speak my language, and when I'm speaking to investors, I always look at what their risk assessment is. Do they want larger risk for larger return, or do they want to? And so what you're talking about in those multi-tenants is the ability. Maybe you don't get top dollar for your market rents, but you're going to have the stability. And
Right.
if the dog washer goes out, that you can put in a self wash, for the dog.
Sure.
So you get the same. You get the same results without having the downside of an empty building. There's nothing worse than an empty building, right?
Right. And it's funny you're talking about the risk profiles. I have another fund manager friend of mine that is actually in the exact same business that I'm in. And he had a potential investor said, well, you could get a lot more investors if you would offer a greater rate of return. And he looked at him and said, you know what? I can offer you any rate of return you want. How much risk would you like me to take with your money?
There you go. There you go. I mean, because the higher the risk, obviously, the higher reward.
Right.
And people don't understand that. They think, okay, I'm just going to get a single tenant net lease. There's no management involved in it. There's no maintenance involved with it. But if they go out, and I've had clients that hung on to it long after I said, get rid of it. And then they end up with an empty building. They have to spend all the money for TIs to get it and attract another tenant.
Right.
And they will still say, oh, but it's still a single tenant, instead of dividing up the property and putting in partitions and leveraging your investment.
It doesn't change any on the banking side either. I would rather do 5 $100,000 loans than one $500,000 loan. Same thing.
You speak, yeah, you speak
It's a
our
little bit
language.
more work on my part, but I like the safety in numbers.
There is safety in numbers, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Bill, what 4 tips would you give for structuring or servicing private money loans for success?
Make sure, well, okay. So if you're going to do loans yourself, if you're going to lend to somebody yourself, you need to hire an appraiser and do an appraisal on that property and get a current market value and a subject to completion value in that appraisal.
Why is that important?
Well, because number one, you need to know what it's going to sell for currently.
Right.
And you want to be in a position to where whatever you're lending on this property, that you're not going to give them more money than it's worth currently. So when you're doing a lot of these loans, there's a construction component. You're going to be holding on to the construction capital. You are not giving it to them. So when you make a loan, let's say there's $100,000, and I'm just using these numbers. If you have $100,000 loan amount, I'm sorry, it's $150,000 total loan amount. 100 is for the acquisition, 50 is for the construction part. You're only going to give them the 100 to acquire the property. You're only going to give them that $50,000 based on the work that has been completed. That's tip number 2. Only work that's been completed. Do not pay in advance.
No.
When somebody puts in cabinets and you just go by a picture, and by the way, you also need to establish that there's a inspection fee of, we'll just say $150. You're going to hire that same appraiser to go back out and inspect every time they request a draw for new money, that they have completed the work that they said they have.
Because that really protects your money.
You can put cabinets up on the wall with one screw in each cabinet, and then they can take that out and put it in another house when the pictures are finished. That's why you have to have an inspector go out and do it.
Lord.
Number 3, set them up on an ACH plan with an automatic withdrawal, so you don't have to worry about chasing them down for money. And actually, number 4, to be successful, really do a background check on them, a criminal background check. That's what we do. We also do a soft pull of credit report. Now, if you're small, you're not doing it yourself, you don't want to spend the money on these things, get the borrower to request their credit bureau and use it. So they need to be.
And that makes sense. I love the idea of the soft pull because it doesn't impact their credit score, their FICO score.
Right. And they can request those. They get them either for free, or it costs them $20 or $30 if they should get it for free at least once a year. But if they've already done it once, they'll have to pay for it. And remember, any of these things that they that you request, they're paying for, not you as the lender. And I would lastly make sure that you have a real estate attorney close the loans, get title insurance, make sure they have hazard insurance on these properties as well. And they're paying for all of this in advance. And think about this. What is it? The golden rule. You have the gold and you make the rules. So
You
don't
make the
feel,
rules.
don't feel bad that you're asking them for all this. Every bank does it. Every lender does it.
Everybody does it.
And
Everybody does
I'm
it.
adding a fifth. Just only do business with people you know, like, and trust. It's going to save you a
Now,
lot of headaches.
isn't that interesting? Because people buy from people that they know, like, and trust. So doing business with them in the same regard, that'll save a lot of headache.
Yeah, and if you run into issues where you're having trouble putting your money out there on a regular basis and really utilizing it properly by having it always invested, find other companies that do this for a living and invest alongside of them.
That is an interesting idea. So you serve the Southeast. So people that are listening right now may be in the Midwest or on the West Coast. What you just said was really sage advice, because you don't want to go out and do this on your own. You don't want to have to go find a servicer that or you're servicing the loan without the tips that you've already given, because now you've just put your money at risk. So
Right.
investing right alongside the people that are doing this, and watching your business grow,
Yeah.
it makes a lot more sense.
Well, there's a couple of things. I did mention that you had to be an accredited investor for our fund, and most funds are going to be that way. So let me give you a quick definition. An accredited
Okay.
investor is someone who has a net worth of $1 million or greater, not counting your primary residence. An accredited investor can also be, it's not in addition to, this is another way of being accredited. If you don't have $1 million, you a single person making $200,000 a year for at least the last 2 years. And then as a family, excuse me, it needs to be $300,000 a year. Those are two ways to qualify as an accredited investor. There's some
Okay.
other ways too. CPAs and certain broker dealer license designations allow you to be accredited as well.
You talked about one of your tips about doing those deals or doing a transaction through an attorney. You're not a title state, is that right? So, in other words, we generally go ahead.
I was going to say, it depends on the state. So North Carolina is a deed trust state. South Carolina is a mortgage state. What's the difference in the two?
Right.
Deed of trust state, the attorney holds the deed in trust until the loan is paid off. In South Carolina, the borrower holds the deed and you have to sue them to get the deed back. That's basically what all that means.
If that's not insulting enough, having to chase them down and then sue them for it.
Well,
Oh,
one of
boy.
the that's just part of the foreclosure process. And
Not a pleasant process.
if you're in the arena dealing with real estate investors, these homes are not occupied when you're having the foreclosure. And listen, our default rate is only about 2%. Actually, it's a little less than 2%, which is not.
That's pretty amazing.
It's pretty low. It's actually
Yeah.
lower than the conforming industry. That said, judges will push these foreclosures through quickly because it's not affecting anyone living there. It's different
Correct.
when you're throwing somebody out of a house that they're living in. But
Sure.
if it's an investment property, they're still working on it. There's nobody in there. You're not hurting anyone other than the person that made the poor investment in the first place.
That's true. That's true. All right. So, wrapping this up, Bill, tell me, what are you reading right now?
I just finished, and I don't read a lot because I drive 40 minutes each way. I do a lot of Audible. So my most recent Audible book was 10X is easier than 2X. And
so true. Isn't that a Grant Cardone statement?
No, it's I can't believe I've forgotten his name. The Strategic Coach is his program, and they've got 3 books out. One of them was Who Not How, and then the next one was anyway, we'll figure it out in a little bit. I'll make sure that you have it in the notes below.
That's
But
awesome.
the 10X thing is really great. It's all about changing your complete thought patterns on only dealing with the 20% of your business that makes you the most money, or the 20% of whatever it is you're doing that makes the most impact. Let the other 80% go. And it takes a lot of courage to do that, because the 80%
really
that
does.
you're doing is mainly your base. And that's where your, we'll call it for a better word, that's where your eat money comes from. It
It's
doesn't
so
mean
true.
you're
And we lose sight of that because we're really always focused, many businesses are focused on let's just acquire, let's
right.
acquire customers. But you can acquire the wrong customer too, and they'll just eat up your time and your resources, right? What's your
There's
favorite
a lot
quote?
of that. And here's the thing. You don't have to stop doing business with those 80%. You just find other people, hire other people to deal with those 80%.
There you
You take
go.
your talents and your value add, and you concentrate on those 20% that you can add the most value to them with.
That's awesome.
And that's going to take you way up. And
One,
it's going to make you feel better too.
well, and it's all about us, isn't it?
Yeah.
We want to be able to sleep at night.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all about me.
For me too. Bill, I love the topic. I love the fact that we talked about how to get money, how to acquire, and how to invest, how to get money into projects that we are always thinking about wanting to do, and what it takes to do that and to be successful. Leave us with one thought. What's your favorite quote?
My favorite quote is, "The house doesn't care how much it's worth. It's about the cash flow."
Oh boy. And it is about the cash flow, isn't it?
Right. So it doesn't matter what the value is. It matters about the income coming in on it.
That's so true. So, Bill, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Carolina Capital Management and Bill Fairman. And I just want to say thank you very, very, very much for joining us today. And if I could figure out which buttons to push, I would be really good at this. I'm getting better. I didn't take you out. So thank you all
awesome.
for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Take care, all.
Do you like to talk about money? If you do and you'd like to be a guest, contact me at lindakay360.com.